My background is in technology. I was an early employee at a company called Arrowhead here in Pasadena, right out of school in 2003. We built that company up, got public, raised a lot of money. Company is a several billion-dollar company on NASDAQ today, right down the street here. I left in 2011 and thought it would be fun to start a restaurant with some friends. I had no idea what I was doing. Opened a restaurant and realized in about a year that this is the hardest business in the world. It is so difficult to deal with all these variable costs like labor and food that expires in a matter of days, and you can't scale like software where you push a button, build it once and sell it 1,000,000 times. You have to build another one every time you want to grow. And so after putting a lot of money in and having failure after failure, I decided to focus on building technology for our restaurants with the idea that there's an opportunity to use technology to make the restaurant industry a lot better and deal with all these problems that I saw trying to operate a restaurant. So for the last 8 years, my group, the Cali Group, has been looking at issues in the restaurant industry, developing technologies, spinning those technologies out into new companies, and building businesses focused on selling innovative products into the restaurant industry. We do have Cali burgers. Somehow we've managed to build Cali burgers all over the place, all over the world. We have about 30-some locations today, scattered in a couple different regions. But most of our capital and effort has gone into building these tech companies. So the first thing we looked at in 2012, 2013 was how do we create new forms of entertainment in the restaurant for kids. And the reason why that was interesting to me is that at that time my kids were playing a lot of Minecraft and getting into other games, and not just playing, but they were watching other people play games online, which didn't make any sense at all to me. And so I started looking into this, right, because I thought they were, maybe something was wrong, but it turns out the rest of the world is also watching other people play video games online, and this whole thing about esports was emerging. And so the idea was, if I could create a gaming center in our restaurants where my kids can come and play Minecraft against each other socially and bring in their friends to hang out after school, that would be kind of like the McDonald's playground was for me when I was growing up. It wasn't about the food, it was about the experience, the McDonald's playground. And so the idea was to create a virtual playground for kids to come in and play these video games. So we did that at Cali Burger, tested it. And there was something very interesting about the social effects of gaming in a place. Instead of the kids sitting by themselves in their bedroom, they come together and they formed teams and they were competing. And so the idea was, well, this is almost like amateur esports, right? Because I can sign up my son to play Little League Baseball, but I don't have a way to sign him up to be on a Little League gaming team and go compete in a place against other kids that are interested in gaming. Yet, there's more people watching the League of Legends Global Championships than are watching like the Super Bowl and the World Series. So we formed Super League Gaming in 2013 based on this software platform that we built for Cali Burger. We capitalized it, and the mission was to build an online and offline esports platform. Long story short, 5 years later, we invested in multiple rounds of financing, along with some venture capital guys and SoftBank and various media companies. We took that company public last year on NASDAQ, and we were the biggest shareholder at the time of the IPO. So convinced myself with that first one that I was much better at building technology companies than operating restaurants. And so continued to do that. And by the way, the things I'm talking about here today in this story are just the things that have worked. We've tried dozens of things that have failed, right? So I'm not going to talk about those. These are the things we've gotten lucky, had a little bit of luck, and kind of been at the right place at the right time. The second thing we did was Miso Robotics. So 2015, we looked at our P&L across our stores in different places and realized that the labor costs in the U.S. were so much higher than the Middle East and other places, approaching 35%. And we're like, okay, all these people issues, not just rising minimum wage, but turnover and the OpEx on the income statement associated with training and retraining. And nobody likes working in the kitchen in our restaurants. People hate working on the grill. They hate working on the fryer. And so the idea was, is there a way to build AI-driven robots to work in the kitchen and reduce the amount of work that humans need to do in certain tasks. And so we partnered with a group of roboticists and AI engineers at Caltech, capitalized and formed Miso Robotics, and put the initial robots into Cali Burger restaurants, a robot called Flippy, which has gotten a lot of attention in the press, and continue to invest in that company right here down the street in Pasadena on Green Street. We have a lab full of robots making French fries, making burgers on the grill, and all sorts of other ideas for using AI and robots to automate kitchens. If anybody's interested, happy to take you through the lab today and show you some really interesting stuff. The next one we did was Kitchen United. In 2016, 2017, we started looking at the growth of delivery through Uber Eats and Grubhub in our restaurants, and we're seeing our delivery go from like a few percent back in 2014, 2015 to like 25% of our business. And so the idea was, well, why do we need to build a full storefront and spend millions of dollars when we could just build a little kitchen in a warehouse and just sell food online, so food e-commerce. So we did that. We tried it in DC. We took out a little warehouse, set up a Cali Burger kitchen, indexed on Uber Eats and Grubhub and Postmates. That failed, and we shut it down because there was nowhere for the Uber drivers to park, so they all got tickets when they pulled up to pick up the food. But we realized that there was an opportunity to build something much bigger, which was a big kitchen center where you have maybe 10 different kitchens, all of them hosting different brands, built to automate transfer the food out to the cars in the street, so that you could have a WeWork-like kitchen experience. So we did that here, our home in Pasadena on Green Street. We bought the Cordon Bleu cooking school and converted it into the first Kitchen United. Now here we are 3 years later. About $70 million has gone into Kitchen United now. We continue to invest alongside our capital partners to build these kitchen centers out all over the country. The last one, which I want to talk about today, PopID, it started about 4 years ago with kiosks and Cali Burger. So we put in kiosks in our restaurants to try and deal with labor cost, and we saw the data showing people spend more money at kiosks, people are happier when they order on kiosks, and we realized that the issue was that the ordering time took a lot longer on the kiosk versus when the person takes the order at the POS. And so the solution to that was we put a camera in our kiosk and let people register to have the system remember what they look like, so when they came back, it could recognize them and pull up their past orders. And that was a great success. And around the same time in China, Alipay launched facial recognition on kiosks at KFC. And what's happened there in the last couple of years has been spectacular. So starting with a couple KFC restaurants and growing from there, about 100 million people today are using facial recognition to transact in China. Alibaba and Tencent are both investing heavily in this technology because they don't like dependency on Apple and Samsung for mobile payment, and expect about 700 million people to be using FacePay in China in the near future. So when we saw that, we added payments to our kiosks, and again, we had great success. People were registering for the idea of using facial recognition to remember their ordering history, and also registering to use facial recognition to pull up their to do their payments. And so so we proved that out, worked out all the kinks in the Cali Burger restaurants, and started selling that technology into other restaurant chains for their kiosks. And initially, we were really focused on just facial recognition to remember customers and pull up their ordering history. We realized that also there was an opportunity to explore how we could use facial recognition for payment to reduce credit card processing fees. When we look at our income statement at Cali Burger, we have roughly 3.5% of our costs are built into payment processing fees, which is a lot of money in a low margin business. So I'll get to how the payment system works in a second. But the idea for this business, when we realized how well it worked in our Cali Burger restaurants, was that just like in China, Alibaba and Tencent have used the restaurant industry to build a whole new way to pay. And the reason why they chose the restaurant industry is because in China, there's a massive amount of volume in fast food restaurants. Well, the same is true in the US. For better or worse, about 85 million Americans consume fast food on a given day. So if you want to introduce a new technology to the consumer and get lots of people using it, there is no better place to do it than putting it in fast food restaurants on kiosks, because that's where you get lots of people coming in. And the idea that you can offer this service initially just to allow people to remember their past orders makes it an easy ask, right? And so they can remember their order, the system can remember their order, and then when they come back, they can add payment. And so our strategy has been deploy our software into everybody that's installing kiosks in the restaurant industry, and that is the channel to get lots of people using facial recognition as a login tool and for payments that eventually can be used throughout the retail sector and even in e-commerce. Here's some of the data. In one of the restaurant chains we work with in Chicago called Deli Time, they have tried to move as much of their sales as possible to the kiosk. They've been very successful at doing that. Of the people that interact with the kiosk, almost half of them elect to register for the use of our service using facial recognition to remember their ordering history so that when they come back, they can just click repeat order. What's even more surprising is that of those people, almost 80% also over time sign up for what we call PopPay, our face payment service. And of course, the big advantage is that the ordering time goes from minutes where you're just putting in the order one by one to 30 seconds where you just push repeat order. So we have really good data to support this idea that using facial recognition on a kiosk is just a better way for people to interact with the kiosk. The way our payment service works is that we let people create a face wallet. So on the kiosk or on the phone, they can sign up for what we call PopPay. They load up their wallet just like you'd load up a Starbucks stored value card. And this allows us to substantially reduce payment processing fees for operators. So the way it works is that when a person loads the wallet, those funds sit in the stored value account. And the result is that the credit card industry only gets to charge one time for, let's say, $100 of loading on the wallet, right? So there's one variable cost and one fixed fee. This means that if a person comes back to, let's say, a Cali Burger 10 times and spends $10 each time, right now Cali Burger pays a variable fee and a fixed fee each time the person comes in and runs a credit card. With the wallet, we can charge Cali Burger 1.5% variable costs each time the person comes back because we've eliminated all the fixed fees associated with all those small transactions. So there's a really interesting arbitrage that's been built in here. And by charging substantially lower fees to merchants for accepting FacePay, the operators that we're working with have an incentive to really push this technology out to their customers and get people using it. We partnered with Panasonic to provide a full kiosk solution. Panasonic is the biggest kiosk supplier in the US. They supply kiosks to McDonald's and lots of other big chains. The full solution is sold by Panasonic. It includes the use of facial recognition to allow people to log into the kiosk to see their ordering history, to pull up their loyalty accounts, and it includes the use of facial recognition for payment. So this is integrated with different POS systems, or we can use different connection gateways to integrate with the POS, but this is a full solution that integrates PopID and PopPay. And our vision for the long run, while we're currently focused on kiosks, is that in the future, every different channel, every different mechanism to accept payment is going to have a camera embedded. So all the payment terminal companies now, whether it's Clover or Pax or Ingenico or Verifone, are making payment terminal systems with embedded cameras. And so we think that the opportunity for the restaurant industry is to accept FacePay in every channel. So on the kiosk, when people use kiosks, at the counter, when the order is rung up at the POS and there's a payment terminal, there's an option for card or Apple Pay or PopPay. At the drive-thru, we think there's an incredible opportunity to increase throughput and reduce labor costs by allowing people to pay with their face. And even in e-commerce through web or mobile apps, we think there's a big opportunity for face-based payments to reduce processing costs for merchants where they're currently paying card-not-present fees.
I do want to jump into the facial recognition stuff because it's really fascinating. But first, you mentioned your successes, but there were also some failures. Any spectacular failures that come to mind?
Oh, we've tried all kinds of crazy stuff. No idea is too crazy, right? And there's no shame in failure in our group. So we've tried things. One big project we had was looking to try and automate inventory management with camera systems using machine vision. That was too hard. That failed. We spent a lot of time on that. We've looked at using camera systems to track things going on in the dining room, and difficult to actually see what's going on, like trying to see if people aren't eating certain food items in an automated way so that we can say, okay, well, maybe that's not being cooked right. We had a big investment, not a big investment. We spent some money. We had this crazy idea that it would be interesting to integrate flexible displays into some of the clothing that the staff wears, right? Well, that turned out to be a pretty bad idea.
Okay.
So yeah, I can go on and on about all the stuff that's failed, but yeah, we've tried lots of different things.
Right. Okay. And
it's fun. We're having a good time, right? That's
at least there's that. Yeah.
Okay. Exactly.
And how important is that then, I guess, for chains to really adopt that kind of? It might seem crazy to have so many ideas and to act on them and then fail spectacularly sometimes. But how important is that?
Well, we view ourselves as a technology company. We happen to own some restaurants that we use as a proof of concept platform. So the leverage in our model as a technology investor is that we only invest in something if we've actually tried it in our restaurants and shown that it works operationally, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're doing early stage investments in technology, if you can show an investor or a customer something in a lab, that's interesting. But if you can actually show it working in a restaurant, that's a whole nother thing. So our advantage is that we can build a robot down the street in Pasadena, and then we can roll it into Cali Burger, which is right down the street here too, open the door because we have the key, roll it in and turn it on, right? And so we are our own first customer, and that has a huge amount of value for all of these things because we, in all cases, showed it working in our restaurants before we actually brought in customers and outside investors.
Okay. That's an obvious advantage there. And I guess the same goes with PopID, and I'd like to focus on that now.
Probably 18 months of just running the software in our restaurants before we took it out, raised outside capital, and brought in other customers.
Okay, I see. And I guess, look, you get it all the time when we talk about facial recognition, where it's headed and how much people seem to want the convenience of that. But it is a fine line towing convenience and creepy. So I guess how are brands supposed to really think about that?
So our view is that what we're doing is user-initiated facial recognition. So the user first has to register for the service. They can do that at a kiosk or they can do that on their phone. And then they have to elect to use the service by pushing the PopID button on the kiosk. And even when they do that, the software only crops their face and does biometrics on their face, so someone standing behind them isn't subject to biometrics. So our view is that people doing facial recognition where they have security cameras and they're doing biometrics on everyone looking for a match against a watch list is creepy, problematic under some of these new state laws. And our system is distinct from that in that it's built around empowering the user to do facial recognition when they want to, and being in compliance with all these new state laws. Okay.
And I mean, you would know, how much are people willing to jump into it and have that convenience? Is it something that they flock to?
I mean, actually the data, the participation is so much higher than we ever expected, right? So because the initial ask requires a very low level of trust, which is sign up to remember my face for purposes of remembering my ordering history. That's the initial ask, right? Mm-hmm. And so if it gets it wrong, it's not a big deal, right? If it pulls up your ordering history instead of mine, you just reorder. Once people gain trust in that system and it's accurate every time and you can't spoof it with a picture and they see all that, then the ask is actually add on this face pay wallet, right? Mm-hmm. So that you can pay with your face. And so I think it's a great way, that initial process of just getting them comfortable with pulling up the ordering history is a great way to get in these other things that require more trust, like payment.
Okay. And so once all the things are ironed out and someone is signed up, they arrive at a kiosk, how many kind of taps will they have to get to it? Like before, will it be a completely hands-free kind of experience?
Well, if you're registered, it's log in with PopID, repeat my order, mm-hmm. and pay with face, and you're done. It could be, less than 10 seconds.
Okay. Look, I only ask, and I hate to ask the question. It's just, the times that we live in right now. It's, I guess, kiosks in the age of coronavirus.
That's good.
How are you thinking about that right now? Because
Yeah.
it's such a thing, and like, I mean, this is not specific just to you, but we have a lot of operators here who have kiosks in the restaurant.
Yeah.
It's a concern, right?
Yeah, yeah, that is a concern. I suppose someday there will be, the machine vision will get so good that you just walk in and you'll make like a hand gesture or something, right? So you don't need to touch anything. You say thumbs up, some kind of hand gesture that'll mean repeat my order and pay, and you sit down and you don't have to touch anything. But now, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. I suppose I would say that using facial recognition is probably better with respect to contamination than not, because you're only touching the screen a couple of times. Repeat order, pay, versus having to put in no tomatoes and lettuce and onions. And so probably relative to the alternative, it's better to use your face. But certainly something that I guess the world is going to have to think about, right? A lot more.
It sounds like a tagline. It's better to use your face.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's better to use your face. I like it. I'm going to trademark that.
Yeah, I can get some royalties from that.
That's right, yeah.
I'd like to shift gears a bit just to Kitchen United, okay? And not just Kitchen United, but in combination with the evolution of Flippy as well. On the Extra Serving podcast last year, you were talking about the future and where it could go. You've got your evolution now of the automated kitchen. The things are on rails. It's a lot easier instead of wheeling a big unit in, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of, you're imagining this idea where the kitchen's completely automated, and it's a virtual kitchen kind of facility.
Yep.
Is that something that you think can actually be a thing?
We're doing it now. So we just opened a restaurant in Fort Myers, Florida, with 2 robots, one on the grill, one on the fry station. So there's humans in the restaurant, in the kitchen, but those humans no longer have to cook fries or burgers, right? Those humans are doing other things. And the most interesting thing about that is that the staff there is so much happier than the staff at our restaurants where we haven't automated. So people, if you go to that store, people that work, the store manager and people on the staff would say, I am never working in a restaurant again without robots, right? Because those are hard jobs, right? Like nobody really likes working on the fryer. Nobody really likes working on the grill. So we're telling these people, okay, your job is no longer to work the fry station and work the grill. It's to manage a robot that's working at those stations. And now you're no longer a grill chef. You're a chef tech, right? And so you are going to be trained in AI-driven robotics, right? And the psychological value associated with telling someone, they're basically now in a high-tech job, right, that may give them skills that can be used in other industries, that they can spend more time interacting with guests and talking to guests about the technology. They love it, right? And so, we see our turnover is a lot lower at that store. The staff is happier. They're smiling at guests more than other stores. All these benefits, right? So actually, we actually think that not only does it have to happen, it's going to be great for people in the restaurant industry. It's going to be great for customers. Consistency is going to be so much better. Food safety is going to be substantially improved, right? Because these automation systems will eventually integrate pathogen detectors so you can see E. coli and viruses. And so I think someday we're going to look at restaurant kitchens and say, I can't imagine going to work or eat at a place that doesn't have automated systems, right? And now it is, it's not going to happen overnight. It is a hard thing, right? You got to figure out configuration issues, right? We started with a stand, then we moved to a cart, now we have the rail system. So there's a lot of work to do. It's going to take a lot of time, but it will happen. And we're going to be patient and just keep investing in it. And everything we develop at Miso, we put into Cali Burger to prove it out. And we're all in on it.
A chef tech. I like that. That's sign me up.
It's a lot better for the resume, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And just with Kitchen United, a year ago we had Meredith Sandlane come talk, who's with Kitchen United, and at that stage she opened with, you probably don't know what a virtual restaurant is, a virtual kitchen is. And this year things have kind of really progressed from there, and we've got operator that's speaking after we get off the stage, and it's what everyone's talking about now. And it's kind of definitely heading that way, and delivery is a huge thing. But from my conversations pulling this conference together, there's this kind of divide where brands are really jumping on board and trying to get in on every channel and be available to the customer that way. But there are still brands that are towing the lines, like, I don't know how this is going to play out. It's so uncertain.
Yeah.
Should I get into it? What's your opinion on this? And I mean, in terms of, for these brands that aren't willing to dive headfirst into disruption, what would you say to them?
Well, I think the model, the cash-on-cash model, and the superiority of that model relative to traditional, brick and mortar build has been well established for major chains with brand awareness, right? So the major chains, the biggest guys, can move into a virtual kitchen, spend a lot less money setting it up, and do much better cash on cash than if they build a retail store. That's because they have the brand awareness to drive the volume through e-commerce, through Uber Eats and Grubhub and Postmates and their own websites and mobile apps. The smaller chains that don't have as much brand awareness, I think it's still an open question, right? I think that's what the data suggests right now, but I would also say we're at the very beginning of where we think delivery is going to go, right? And I just, again, I look at my kids for a lot of this stuff, right? I think my kids tell me facial recognition is not a big deal because they're taking pictures of themselves. My kids are playing video games all the time, so we did Super League. I think with delivery, my kids can't contemplate the idea that you'd actually go out and get food, right? They're like, you just push a button and the guy brings it here, right? And so when you look at like the future, right, I think that's just, it's going to be so much bigger than it is now. And as the whole market for delivery grows, I think that the model will become better and better to show that this is not only a great way to outsource your off-premise business in a trade area where you already have a retail store just to make things clean, it's a great way to expand into new markets without having to build brick and mortar stores.
Okay.
So it's early, I would say, and just let the model play out.
Right, but if it's early days, but
Yeah.
I mean, now's a super important time. Right?
Yeah.
If they're not getting into it right now in a big way and thinking about how to deal with it moving forward, that could be a problem.
Yeah, I think so. There's going to be, there's going to be a lot of virtual kitchens out there. So I do think, I think it will become a standard kind of thing for the restaurant industry.
Okay. I'd like to open it up. We probably got some space here for one or two questions from, yeah.
First of all, congratulations on, I've worked with some of your entities, and their partnership approach is really unique, and it's really great. So,
Thanks.
So that culture is just really awesome.
Being crazy, thank you.
Well, I mean, the way they approach it versus
Yeah.
an Uber type, approach.
Yeah.
How would you suggest as operators that are, trying to go as fast as we can and get into all this and all the other stuff that's happening because of folks like you, how do you suggest we think or kind of navigate, and, picking the partners and staying ahead of the curve? It's like every time you come, it's kind of like mind blown, once again, and here we go. So, like, how would you suggest we sort of roadmap and think about this?
Yeah, you mean in general with respect to all
As a
these?
brand,
Yeah.
or as an owner of multiple brands,
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah.
Partnering with folks like yourself, or
Yeah.
other people like yourself, also blowing our minds at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, how do we put all this together?
Yeah, I think these things are different in terms of their ease of adoption, right? So, like, Face Pay is simple. It's a software update, right? It's simple to add it as an option at the kiosk or at the counter on the payment terminal. You do a software update. Okay, now you can offer Apple Pay card or Face Pay. Very easy to try that, right? Robotics is hard. I mean, to make the decision that you want to integrate a robot into your kitchen, you got to think about completely changing your operating procedures, right? Yet there's so many massive advantages to that. Delivery, it depends on the strategy. So I guess what I would say is that the way we've been thinking about all these things is that they're responsive to pain points. So maybe it depends on what your biggest pain points are. What makes the most sense to focus on in terms of innovation or adoption of new technology in your restaurants, and then just the amount of patience and capital you have to experiment with new technologies, right? I guess that's kind of a general answer, and probably there's a much better one if you dive into specifics on a particular case. But
Integration sort of, or prioritizing pain points and solutions that are available for you.
yeah, I mean that's how we think about it, right? Like again, of all like the stuff, actually the stuff that we've probably had the most success with in terms of investing in has all been trying to solve a problem, right? Big problems. So the big problems we see are labor. I mean, and not just minimum wage, but turnover is the biggest problem we see right now. It's just that constant, people want to go drive Ubers or be pro esports players, whatever. They don't want to work in restaurants. So that constant turnover is a huge problem. And then delivery we see as a big problem because of the cost, right? So the marketplaces are charging so much money that it's not clear that there's a whole lot of margin when you're sending stuff into cars to be delivered into homes. And so dealing with the margin pressure from delivery and labor costs are two big things. I love focusing on payment processing because to me that's like a very easy way. If you can reduce your payment processing fees by 1% in a low margin business, that's just free cash flow, right? Just switching people's payment mechanism. So that's why we've really been aggressive about attacking that problem through our FacePay rails. But yeah, I suppose the answer depends on your biggest pain points.
Yep, one last question.
Just a request, can you create like a robot to train employees how to have like better hospitality, how to manage conflict, et cetera? Because we talked a lot about like how to automate like fry cooks or fryers and all that stuff.
Right.
We need something to help like train our people.
Yeah, we haven't thought about that. Yeah. What about cleaning bathrooms? I think that would be a good robot, right? Nobody likes cleaning bathrooms.
Yeah, but what are we going to do with the labor force when we automate? We just sort of like we're scratching the surface of we'll like translate or we'll transition them into like front of house positions. They'll be friendlier, but like how? Yeah, that is something we're trying to figure out. So what are these people going to do? Because our position at Cali Group has been we're not reducing staff count at a store. We're just making the store work a lot better by redeploying the labor to do other stuff. And so it is about now, okay, how can we turn like a QSR experience into almost like a dining experience because we have people that actually go talk to guests a lot more, right? So that's something we look at. Yeah, like as an example, I'm trying to learn Chinese. My wife's Chinese American or whatever. And so like when I repeat back, like at my app and I try to repeat back this Chinese whatever, like word for building or whatever it might be, and it manages, or it tells me whether my tone is right or whatever. So all these little like social cues could be super interesting.
Yeah, because that's where we want, that's our vision is let people do things that they're good at, which means, and that they like to do, which means interacting with people, not standing over a fryer or standing over a grill. That's our goal, right? Or whatever equipment, right?
Great. Well, look, we're just nearly out of time, but I do want to ask you one last thing, John. And you live in, the restaurant tech world is your realm, right? And that's what you're pushing forward into the industry. I know that, especially for our design development folks rolling out stores, there's this kind of line at the moment where it's, how much do we follow the convenience and integrate technology and how much do we want to try and make it about being in the experience? And I mean, we all see customers sitting around a table being friends and on their phone there's this world, do we want to create a world where we continue to go down this path and people stop engaging in the world? But I mean, in your mind, how do you envision we can use the technology to help pull people back into the world in these environments that we're building? Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. So that, the whole thesis for Super League was kids are on their phone, so give them something to do on their phone in the restaurant, right? So I can't say that we've had a mission of trying to get people off the phone. As one of our big investment theses has been, it's inevitable that kids are playing games, and so let them play the games in our restaurants or in other restaurants. But I do think there's something about biometrics and facial recognition that is more about like leave your phone in your pocket, right? So our whole thing is, you don't need your phone to pay anymore, right? You don't need to pull out a card, you don't need to pull out your phone, and as face and digital identity becomes more and more useful, and you can imagine someday that there's a biometrics portal where you do everything with your face, right? Not just payment, but you enter buildings with your face, so you don't need a key card or your phone to enter a building. You go to stadium events, you don't need a mobile ticket or a paper ticket, use your face. You can, all sorts of things where you have to prove your identity now, where you either use a card or something, or your phone, you can use your face. And so I think if that becomes a norm, then that does get people outside of the phone and making more eye contact and things like that. But the phone is still a very powerful tool. So we will continue to invest in stuff and look at things where the phone is a part of the experience.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, John Miller.